Hey, Scott here. Today we're going to be looking at a weed eater lawnmower that the guy that broke it, who owns it, was just mulching some leaves last fall, and he ended up hitting a rock with it. And after that, he just put it away for the season, and he's pulling it out again for this season, but he can't get it started. So let's dig into it, and I'll show you what's going on. What we're working on today is a weed eater 22-inch lawnmower with the Briggs and Stratton engine. It's a 10 Chi 502 engine. And that's the model number of the lawnmower itself is right there. Alright, let's dig into her. I've tuned up this lawnmower in the past, and I know that for sure because I'm the one that wrote that. 20 ounces of SAE 30 motor oil. Alright, he says, I was mulching up my leaves last fall and I hit a rock, he says. And she shut off and she won't restart. Well, let's take a look. First of all, let's take a look underneath. Oh yeah, there's a bent blade. This side's not so bad. That's definitely bent. Now if we turn the blade real slow and keep an eye on the shaft here, I should focus on that a little bit better. Just want to turn it over real slow and watch the shaft. And we want to just kind of just see if that stays relatively straight. Looks pretty good. It's bent at all, I'll have a little vibration to it, but it's not crazy. Alright, let's see if it'll start. Alright, I already checked, it's got some gas in it. That doesn't smell too bad. It's got oil in it. And let's give it a pull. Not even trying to fire. Spark plug's connected. Well, I'm gonna guess that the flywheel key is sheared. Time to dig her into it. All right, looks like somebody put just a random screw here. I don't know what that's all about. And looks like this plastic piece is held on by that screw there. So we'll get that out of there. I think 5/16 will do it. Well, something else is. It's like a plastic clip somewhere on here. Oh, I see what it is. Let me bring you around the other side and show you what I found. Alright, so here on this side, I'm trying to get this piece of plastic off. There are these plastic tabs right here. So let's release those, pull them out. Here we go. And this tab is catching right here in this part. Now we're going to get the rest of this off, and we've got a bolt here, another bolt just like it on the other side, and one bolt up front here. Alright, I think those are 3/8. Now there's a metal tab here with that screw held in place, so be aware of that. one last thing on the other side is the oil fill tube, and I think we're going to go with a 5/16 to remove that. Nope, I'm wrong. Smaller. Quarter-inch. So you can see what's going on. We got two little screws here. Here. Now the oil fill tube is loose. You could pull it out if you want, but then you might get dirt down here in there. So let's just leave it alone. Should be able to lift this off now. And we're looking at the flywheel. Let's get a closer look. So under the flywheel here, in there is a key, and we think that's what's sheared. Yeah, that's all loose. That's no, never mind. Alright, we're gonna have to pop that nut off and take a look at what's going on inside. Alright, so we've got a 15/16 impact socket. Spun that right off. Let's take a look inside the flywheel. Alright, so here is the key. Well, here's the thing. It lines up pretty good with the flywheel, so I don't think it's a flywheel key that's sheared. It clearly is not. What else is going on here? So as I'm pulling this apart, expecting to find a sheared flywheel key, which is not sheared, I'm kind of looking around going, what else could be wrong? And now check it out down here. See, there's a crack right here. This is a plastic tube that is not supposed to be cracked. So that would probably be our problem. It's sucking air. And that's why I want to start. This plastic tube goes over here to the carburetor. And that's where the fuel gets in to the head. That would be a good reason why it's not starting. So let's pull this apart, and I'm sure I can get another one of those. Alright, so what I'll have to do is to get rid of the air filter here and get the carburetor off and get the I may not have to get the ignition coil off. If I can get to these two bolts and remove that part. I might have to take the ignition off, just for easier access. So let's get started. Alright. Air filter is on backwards anyway, at least the cover is, but no problem. See, the owner did tell me that somehow this whole gas tank and carburetor bit came off, and he was able to tighten this back up. But I noticed there's a bolt up front here that's missing. So I wonder if he broke it when he tried to put this back on, if he didn't have it lined up right. But we're going to get over here on this side. I believe it's a 1/2 inch socket, so let's get on that and get that off of there. Alright, so like I said, normally there's a bolt up front here that connects to the fuel tank, and that is not on there. That's missing. And then this is the main one that holds the fuel tank on. like I mentioned earlier, the owner of this machine, he said this whole thing fell off and he put it back on. So let's work this off. Oh yeah, you see that plastic tube is not supposed to be wiggling and jiggling. It's definitely broken. Oh baby. There we go. And a bit of linkage here. And that whole bit is off. And look at this. That is not supposed to be broken. Alright, make sure that you put this, when it's time to put this back on, it goes here. So pay attention to that. So, let's get to the other side of this broken tube. Alright, so right here there are two small bolts holding that on, 1/4 inch. Long skinny bolts. And see, that's the intake valve. And this is the broken part. Something like this. But yeah, that's not supposed to be in two pieces. Ooh, something was going on here too. Yeah, he needs a couple more new pieces, but I think this thing will run just fine once we fix all that. Alright, looks like we got to order some parts. This happens to be a Briggs and Stratton, what is that model? 10T 502 1022B1. Date of manufacture 2010. Alright, 10T 502. Let's go over some parts. Alright, so it's been a couple of days, but our new part showed up. The new part comes with 2 new screws to mount it, a washer, and of course the plastic tube. So let's get it installed on there. Alright, so what I want to do is to kind of clean up in there and make sure that nothing falls down into there. And so I got my vacuum. I also want to get that old gasket out of there. So I'm going to be vacuuming while I pry at that so none of that schmutz falls down in a hole. Alright, it's sticking on there pretty good, so I'm going to get a sharper edge to pry that gasket off of there. Alright, I got a small chisel here. Let's see if it's sharp enough to break that stuff loose. Oh yeah. It's a little tedious, but we're getting there. Alright, I'll get back to you as soon as I clean this up. Alright, so I've got that surface all cleaned up and hit it with a little brake fluid to clean that up a little bit. And now what I think I'm going to do, I want to kind of clean up this stuff with the air compressor. So I'm going to just kind of take a rag and stuff it in there and then hit it with an air compressor and clean up the rest of this. Okay, so I got the new part here, and I've got the new gasket and the screws, and my hope was to be able to just slide this under the ignition coil here and get it installed, but it won't go because there is actually a flat spot. I don't know if the flat, more like there's a bump out right here, and that protrusion won't allow me to get under the ignition coil. So what I will have to do is take the ignition coil off to install this tube, and then we'll put the ignition coil back on, and I'll show you how to set that when it happens. Alright, so we are going to need a 1/4 inch socket to remove the ignition coil. Try to get out of the sunlight so there's not a shadow. So this particular there you go. Now this is the governor vane, and it is connected to linkage right there. So we can just lift the linkage off of it, let that hang, and unscrew. In fact, let me turn it on so I can get out of the light. So I'll just take this, set that aside, and then this little bolt here. Of course, you can see we're disconnected from the spark plug. And once that screw is out, we can just take the ignition coil right off. There's a wire connected to the bottom. You can just set it aside, or you can disconnect it. Doesn't matter. But now we have full access to that space. Alright, so now we can take the tube and the new gasket. Get these screws started. It's nice to have the holes where the screws go are kind of cut in a triangular shape, so you could start the screw through and it holds the gasket in place. So let's just set this down in place. Oops, sorry for bumping the camera. And I think a 1/4 inch is still what we need to be using. Should start easily if everything's lined up. Okay, now I'll just snug it up a little bit. Just plastic, no sense killing it. There we go. Now that tube is back in place, and we'll get the ignition coil put back on. Okay, with that tube back in place now, we're going to put the ignition coil back in place. So we'll start off by putting this screw in, and then this one. Oh, I turned it the wrong way. Alright, here's how we're going to do this. The ignition coil is in on slots like this. We're going to pull it out away from the flywheel, and then we're going to tighten it down. Not super tight, just snug it up. Both sides. Okay. And then you can take either a business card or an index card, fold it in half, or this is a piece of cardboard that I got from Briggs and Stratton with another ignition coil. And you're going to find the magnet on the flywheel. I think it's right here. And you're going to point it toward the ignition coil and put in this cardboard. And then you're going to loosen these up, and the magnet should suck the ignition coil up against the flywheel. Alright, maybe that's not the magnet. Let's go around here. There's the magnet. Okay, so now the magnet is holding it tight against there. So now we want to snug these down again after we've loosened them. What we're doing is putting the proper gap between the ignition coil and the flywheel. Snug those up, and we can slide the paper out, and our ignition coil is back in place where it needs to be. Okay, so now it's time to put the flywheel nut back on and get this all put back in place. And what I'm going to do before I tighten this down, I have to tighten this to 55 foot-pounds. And what I'm going to do to hold the flywheel in place is actually to put a C-clamp like this underneath, and then as the blade, which is still connected underneath, will swing around and press against this, and that will hold the flywheel in place so I can get my 55 foot-pounds. Okay, so now let's turn it until the blade hits the C-clamp. Right there. Okay. Now I know this thing came off of there. Like this, I believe. And then we'll put the nut back on. And I got my 15/16 impact socket on my torque wrench, and I have it set at 55 foot-pounds. There it is. All right, and we could take this little bit of linkage, put it back here, and let's move on. All right, so now I'm going to take the fuel tank here with the carburetor on. I cleaned it all up, and I did have to replace the O-ring that's inside here, because that O-ring is necessary to create a seal around this new tube that we just put in. So what we'll do is we will take the linkage, connect that again. Also, I mentioned earlier that this bolt was missing, so it's just a 1/4 bolt. I grabbed the 1/4 bolt, and what we're going to do is slide right here the carburetor onto that new tube that we just installed. It's a little snug with the new O-ring, but be gentle. There we go. Also, don't forget this bracket goes here, and we got the large bolt that goes here, and we got the 1/4 bolt that goes here. Well, I took it out of there, so I know it'll go in. There we go. So just a 7/16 now. And then that's going to be a 1/2 inch there. Oh, I almost forgot. This rubber boot. It's got to go back here on this tube and the carburetor. There we go. Usually easier to do that before you tighten everything up. Slide that up. There we go. That'll sit up there. And now we're ready to put the top back on. Alright, let's get this back on. Oh, we got a hole of line up here and another one on the other side. And there's 3 bolts. They all have 3/8 inch head. So one here. And one on the front. And there's a balloon. And then we also have the bolts that hold the oil fill tube on. A couple of little bolts like that. I think they're 1/4 inch. Oh my. There we go. The last thing we've got is this plastic cover, which just snaps into place, and then there's a little bolt that goes right here. And that, I think, is 5/16. Alright, the only bolts we got left are these which were actually the old bolts from the broken tube, so we don't need those because the new tube came with them. So now, put the spark plug wire back on, and let's give it a pull, see if it starts. Alright, check the oil. Oil's good. Prime it and give it a pull. Well, that's more than we had last time. Let's try that again. got her started, and it still has a little shake to it because I haven't replaced the blade on it yet, because wasn't going to invest money in a new blade until I made sure the engine was running. So I think we'll put a new air filter on it. We'll put a new blade on it, but we'll call this a win. All right, thanks for watching.